And good afternoon. Welcome into Market Talk for this Monday, January 31st. Great to have you with us. I am your host, Jesse Allen. Thanks for joining us here today and making us part of your day. Find us online at markettalkag.com. That's markettalkag.com. You can find all of our information for our social media there, as well as our streaming sources and so much more. It is all online, markettalkag.com. We have plenty to look at in the market trade today, as we saw the soybeans and meal trade higher, wheat under heavy pressure, though, and corn stuck between the two once again. Let's talk about it, and let's bring in our good friend John Heinberg with Total Farm Marketing joining us here this afternoon. John, good afternoon, sir. Happy Monday. Not a whole lot changed in the news cycle over the weekend. We got a lot of the same news stories in this trade, and really not a lot of fresh news today. But you look at things, we started higher overnight, pretty much across the board, and then we opened the day session, and that changed in a hurry, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. That overnight strength and a couple of these markets really disappeared in a pretty big hurry. But I guess let's get focused on the market that keeps rocking and rolling, which is the soybean market. And we keep a close eye on that South American weather, what's going on there. Again, still looking at some drier trends. We're still seeing some production cuts. Ag Rural came out today, lowered their Brazilian forecast to 128.5 million metric tons. That's starting to get pretty thin when we start getting under 130. So that keeps some strength in the soybean meal. It also helps support that bean market as we poked at that $15 barrier today. Watching what oil's doing. We did have a reversal in that crude palm oil chart today, and that kind of spilled over, I think, too, into the bean oil market. And then the spread started kicking in between meal and oil as we saw those unwind and added a little bit of selling pressure to that bean oil side. So, but right now, that bean market still looks like it's got some legs underneath of it. Obviously, $15 is going to be a pretty big barrier. If we get through there, maybe we got a little bit more momentum to the upside, because I'm not sure who's going to be the seller in this market at this time frame.
And I was going to ask, realistically, I mean, that $15 mark, does it feel like that we're going to have a lot of trouble getting through that if we keep getting more of these estimates out that the Brazilian crop is shorter than expected, and we see that summer bids at the ports are higher already in Brazil than they are in the US? I mean, realistically, how much of a barrier is $15 going to be if we continue to get bullish news like we're getting?
To me, it feels a little bit more psychological than realistic right at this time frame in just terms of that number. And obviously, look at the export numbers today in terms of inspections. We saw those numbers come in at the high end of of ranges. Now we're actually maybe pushing ahead of the USDA target in terms of shipments. So that's a good number when you see 1.4 million metric tons move out last week, especially in a window where those are supposed to start dying down here. And like you just mentioned, with the issues going on in South America, we're starting to see some premiums starting to build into those summer months or late spring months, in a window where we typically are kind of out of the market, where we may be back in. And that's just something else that helped fuel this market higher, as we saw that good strength throughout. Those strong prices in front month beans carried into the new crop beans. And that was probably some of the reason we saw that spillover support at least stay into the December 22 corn, the new crop corn, as that acre battle is still looming as we get closer to March.
Very, very true. And you think about corn spreads there got hammered today, just with the pressure of the wheat market pulling on front month corn, but new crop, yeah, just trying its best to stay with soybeans here to keep that acreage in play. But I mean, really, new crop December corn was only a 4 today. It wasn't up that much. So, what are your thoughts with this corn market?
Yeah, it was very interesting watching those spreads really kind of fall apart today. That old crop, new crop, March being down 10 at the settle, to East corn still holding 4 cents higher. 14, 15 cent move in a spread in a day is a pretty big window. That might be that first little indicator that maybe we're getting to a bit of a top here in the short term. March did put a new contract high in today, then rolled off that and put in what we call a bearish reversal on the charts, taking out the trading range from Friday and finishing towards the bottom of the range. So that may continue to put some pressure on the front end of this market, spilling into the May and into the July, as we really took those spreads and ran them out pretty aggressively here. Right now, at least, it's still a little bit more of a bean story and a corn story in South America. Export inspections today were in the middle of the range. Like to see a little bit more demand possibly build. We're kind of missing that a little bit right now on corn, even though sales have been pretty solid. But it's still just a window. Maybe we've just run this thing a little bit here, and then the charts are starting to tell us that maybe we're due for a little bit of a break as we move into February.
Well, and I look as well at just some of the farmers selling we maybe have seen here in the last couple of weeks. I mean, if I'm still looking at selling some corn here, looking at things, looking at the books, what should I do as a farmer right now, looking at this and maybe start to see a little weakness or a temporary top building into the corn market?
You get technical signals like the one today. That should be a bit of a sell signal for some producers to go ahead and get some bushels moved to the sidelines. We still got an inverted market, so you can come back in and get into July or even way back into September, even though it's a little more new crop versus old. But at least you can set yourself up for a weather play if we do have some issues. This corn market still probably got some work to do here in terms of getting acres bought. We need a good crop. We're going to still see what happens with the second crop, South American, corn, where it's at in terms of the conditions they're dealing with. So that corn story may be just a little bit more prolonged here in terms of when it kicks in as compared to the immediate story in beans now. So, but at the same time, you got 625, 626 on the board in front of you. That's good value. Continue to reward yourself here, but then find a way if you want to stay in the market, they don't get some strategies out longer term to keep that window open.
Definitely. And, some of those longer term strategies, I mean, we can come back in and own this on paper if we want to. There's a lot of things to consider when you're looking at your marketing here that can help you out and locking a floor in underneath. John, this wheat market's all over the place, it feels like. A lot of pressure there today. Do you have any indication on just why we saw that pressure today? Was it just a lack of fresh news on the Black Sea region issues, or what's going on there?
Still think that's a big part of things in that regard. We're waiting for new demand news to come into the market too. Export inspections today are still fairly steady, nothing flashy overall in that regard. Then it turned into a bit of a technical move as well. We tried to rally things out. We failed there on the overnight session, and then we just saw things continue to break through moving average after moving average, closing that March and that May contract under the 100-day, which opens us up probably go retest the low around 740. So we'll have to see how that kind of plays in here. So again, just looked like a bit of a technical push. At the same time, too, I think some of that spread trading may have came into play as well, between the classes of wheat as well as, versus the other grains. But it just looked like right now, like the downward momentum stayed there, in that wheat market, especially after, we kind of failed to push out here over the last week and then, turned it over going into the end of the week. And the sellers just stayed forward and pushed it even further today. We'll have to see where we can find a bottom here. If it does hold that 740 barrier, then we'll maybe see some strength come back in. We need to see that demand pick up, at least here on the U.S. side. And as long as things still stay relatively quiet in the Ukraine, maybe it's just a window where some of the traders took some money to the sidelines here, especially with the end of the month.
Definitely, and I think we got to think about that in the context of everything today. End of the month, book squaring, position squaring. That's always a big thing to consider with the end of every month. And we saw some of that with the stock market today, a little bit up and down. I mean, overall, this has been a rough January when we think about it, stock market wise and energies and money. I mean, in a lot of different ways. So, what are your thoughts as we wrap January here and head into February? Overall with maybe some of the outside market pressures, John?
Well, we got to keep an eye on the equity markets. Obviously, what's going to happen with the fund, with the Fed and the interest rates. The market's already been pricing in some adjustments. We'll have to see if things come together there. Obviously, the geopolitical risks are still huge with the Ukraine situation going forward. So we'll have to watch that. Obviously, now we're getting into the Chinese New Year holiday. So they'll be stepping out of the market here for a while just to, as a celebration of that New Year holiday. That always seems to be a time too that brings a little bit of pressure because when the biggest buyer in the world's taking a break, markets don't have a lot of juice to climb. So going forward, there's a lot of different moving pieces out there that keeps me pretty cautious of where they are and what could be going in front of us. Then you still just look at that strength in the commodity sector, the talk of inflation, look at the move in crude oil, trying to get back through the top of the range today. Those are some things that are still just going to have money flowing one way or another. It's going to keep the volatility extremely high, especially as we continue to move forward and try to figure out what direction the economy and things want to move in terms of this market.
Let's talk livestock. A really strong day there today, John. A lot demand. I think demand is probably the key word here we're seeing as we move into February. Good demand in the hog sector that helped drive prices higher there. But then, there's a lot of anticipation of a bullish cattle inventory report here this afternoon. We're talking just ahead of the release of that report. And obviously, that's going to shape trade here tomorrow and probably the rest of the week. But what's your thoughts on what you saw in livestock today? Why don't we start with the cattle complex first?
Yeah, we got that cattle inventory numbers today. A lot of times those are already kind of figured in, but maybe we're looking at a reflection, especially in that feeder market today with the breaking a little bit in the front end corn contracts. Looking at that calf crop continuing to get a little bit smaller year over year, just reflecting that tighter overall supply. So we have to continue to watch how the market wants to play that out. That demand side of the equation, as you mentioned, is still strong and still very supportive. Retail values have quieted off a little bit here at the top, but boy, historically, there's still some good value there, and the Packers still know that. So they still got plenty of ammunition if they want to bid up in the cash market. Just kind of like the move in a couple of these contracts today. Now we'll see if we can get some follow through. You got April cattle, retwisting that contract high. Could be a pretty key spot if it can't get through there. Get some breakout in that window. Even some of those fall contracts, October breaking out to a new contract high today. Just kind of blowing right through the old top from last week. So, there's still some longer term stories. I love in this cattle market on that tighter supply picture. Maybe that's why we saw the buyers step in today and just, grabbing some positions, anticipating that report confirming what we think we know, which is that tighter supply is coming, while the demand side of the equation still stays relatively strong.
Well, speaking of tighter supply, we're seeing that in the hog market too, and that's something that we continue to see hogs summer months over $100. I mean, what's your thoughts with this hog market moving into February, John?
It's been a heck of a run, but I'm a little bit cautious right now. We just got some price action the last couple of days. Makes me wonder if, maybe we've hit our peak here. Again, we still got fairly decent supplies. Cash market hasn't really responded here, despite that strength in that retail values. We're looking at April hogs around 95. We put a bit of a topping action in last week. You go look at those summer hogs again on Thursday last week. We actually put some reversals on the charts. Even today we kind of rejected a test of those levels. So it feels like maybe the market's getting a little bit tired here and the technical side could be kicking in. Now, with that being said, this could be just a bit of a consolidation pattern till we look for some news and get us going one way or another. But obviously we put some value into this market pretty quickly. Might be just that time frame. We do see a bit of a technical breakdown. We do have February coming off this month. It's running still about an $8 premium to the index in the cash market. Obviously, you got April trading a solid $15 over that cash market. So that makes things feel a little bit lofty to me, at least at this time frame, unless we continue to see that cash market wake back up and close the gap on its side. So I'm a little cautious right now in the hog market. Think there's some good value there. Probably a great spot to start protecting yourself a little bit in the summer months as well. But at this time frame, we can see some seasonal turn. Now, with that, I like what the retail values are doing. Historically, they're strong. Should keep the momentum and the packer margins fairly heavy, so they can continue to bid after hogs. We'll have to see what's in front of us because both of these livestock sectors numbers are tight. And if that corn market gets rolling again, you're going to see some premium keep coming back in just to encourage producers to keep hogs in the barn or cattle on feed.
Well, John, let's talk the dairy market as well since we got you here today. I'm seeing plenty of green on the screen in dairy. I know we've had volatility, a lot of volatility as of late. What do you see with our dairy markets as we move into the month of February?
Pretty nice turn off this most recent break. Again, following through with some upside today. Watching what's happening with that cheese trade as well as the product trade. Blocks and barrels both dropped under $1.80 last week. Now we're getting some recovery there, and that's helping boost this market higher. I think maybe the tops might be in at least for the short term here with that breakout in January. So anytime we get movement to the upside, I'm going to be a little bit cautious unless we find a way to push back through those recent highs. Still, again, a lot of great value for producers, mid 21s all the way out till the fall. Stuff that they need to take advantage of in terms of their marketing strategy, somehow building some floor. But in this market, you want to keep some flexibility in. That's something we're really going to be talking about for a lot of these different commodities, making sure you keep some availability on either side of the coin. If you're making sales, how do we keep the top side open, and how do we manage that risk against a headline that could bring us quickly to the downside?
Well, John, plenty of great stuff as always today. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to reiterate for us on this Monday?
Again, continue to watch the news, watch the weather. Soybean market gets to that stage sometimes where the sellers are just not even in the market because they're afraid to stick their neck out. So we'll have to see what tomorrow gives us. Typically, we stay fairly strong till about Valentine's Day on corn, till about the end of the month, what we call first notice day in that March contract, and that's typically when we start really seeing some pullover. So even though we're getting pretty lofty here, and every step we take forward makes me a little cautious. So don't forget about that defense. As much as we enjoy the euphoria of high prices and things moving to the upside, we can see how quickly it can end. So make sure you're managing that risk on the downside on a daily basis.
Well, John, if producers need a little advice, I know they can reach out to you and the team there at Total Farm Marketing. What is the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Sure, love to chat with them anytime. Feel free to give me a call at 800-334-9779 or shoot me an email at johnh@totalfarmmarketing.com. Don't forget about that website of ours, totalfarmmarketing.com. Again, a lot of great information. Usually we got webinars after some of the USDA reports. Those are free to producers. Feel free to sign up, take a look at that information.
TotalFarmMarketing.com, the website. With that, John Heinberg, thanks for joining us once again on this Monday, sir. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great. Have a good week.
John Heinberg with Total Farm Marketing here on Market Talk for this Monday, January 31st. That's going to do it for the show today. Find us online, markettalkag.com. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.